Okay, hello and welcome to our COVID-19 support group. This is Bronwen from Tokyo Mental Health, and today I want to spend some time talking about setting boundaries, especially during quarantine time. So many of us will be spending more time at home and maybe with our partners, with our family, with our loved ones, but we'll be spending a lot more time than usual, especially at this time at home. So it's important that we recognize if we have set healthy boundaries and see that if we have unhealthy boundaries, how to recognize that and how to maybe improve that as well. So, for example, some of us may feel that we spend more time arguing with our partners, whilst others might feel that they're less able to say no to things that they don't really want to do. So these highlight the importance of setting boundaries at home. Now you may ask, what are boundaries? What do healthy boundaries look like? Why are they important? And how do I set boundaries at home? So that's what we'll be going through today. So before we carry on, I want to start with a short exercise. If you're watching this video after it's been uploaded, so if you're listening, I would like for you to try this at home. Grab a partner, and I want you to assign one as the maintainer and one as the mover. Now stand 20 feet apart or whatever space that you have in wherever you are. And for movers, I would like you to start slowly walking towards your partner in a straight line. And freeze when your partner says stop. For maintainers, I want you to command the mover to start walking towards you, but then command them to stop by raising your hand, palm forward, and by actually saying stop. Do this when the mover comes to your comfort zone, comes to the edge of your comfort zone. Okay, and once you do that, I want you to switch places and repeat. Please go ahead and pause this video to have a go at each role. Okay, so that might have been a bit of a bizarre exercise, but what did you just experience? Let's take some time to reflect. We can ask questions. When you were being a maintainer, how did you know when to say stop? What did you notice in your body before, during, and after you commanded your partner to stop? Did you say stop at the time that you thought you would? Would you have said it sooner or later? How did it feel to create that boundary with your partner? And do you think that it is easier or harder to say stop when it involves emotions? Now, when you were a mover, what did you notice in your body when your maintainer partner commanded you to stop? How did it feel to respect your partner's boundaries? Based on your relationship with your maintainer partner, did you expect to be allowed as close or closer than you were? Were you comfortable with the boundary that your partner established? So I hope that was a nice short exercise for you to experience and reflect on a real life example of a physical type of boundary. As the exercise nicely demonstrated, boundaries are the rules, limits, and guidelines we set for ourselves in how we interact with others. Boundaries can be shaped from many factors, such as from how we were raised by family, from our past experiences, from our personality, from our beliefs, religion, and so on. Boundaries work in both directions, which means that it's not only guidelines on how we communicate to others, but also what we allow from others, especially in terms of how we allow others to behave and respond towards us. Boundaries can also tell us how we'll react when the boundary has been violated. And boundaries can come in many different forms. These include physical boundaries, which is what we just experienced in the exercise, in terms of what and how much we allow in our physical space, but it also includes touch as well. A violation of physical boundaries can make us feel uncomfortable and anxious, and the need to freeze or flight from the situation. There's also emotional boundaries, which are boundaries we set, boundaries associated with the feelings and emotions we experience. This relates to how much we allow ourselves to feel our emotions and how much we are willing to share with others. Now, you may feel that your feelings are being invalidated when someone says you'll be fine after you just disclosed your honest negative feelings. You may also sometimes feel overwhelmed when others disclose their intense emotions to you and feel that you sometimes have to carry someone else's emotions with you. And these are examples of an unhealthy emotional boundary. There's also mental boundaries, which are boundaries of your own beliefs and thought process. Sometimes you might not see eye to eye with another person when discussing a particular topic, but you have the right to your own thoughts, opinions, values, and beliefs. Our mental boundaries might be violated when our differences in opinions are met with aggression, belittlement, or invalidation. Now, there's also time and energy boundary. Do you set boundaries on how much time and energy you're willing to spend? For example, this boundary may be violated when we feel that we're being kept longer in a conversation than we would like to have. Now, finally, there's material boundaries. How willing are you to share personal possessions with others, and how should they be treated? If you feel that someone is using your things without asking for permission first, your material boundary may be violated. But it's your decision on whether you want to share, whether you feel comfortable sharing your things, or you prefer not to share at all. And that is up to you. Okay. A good indicator of when boundaries have been violated is when we feel anxious or uncomfortable in a situation. So there's different forms of boundaries, but there's also different types as well. There's rigid boundaries, which are characterized by mainly avoiding intimacy. People in rigid boundaries may often find themselves saying no, and this can cause two people to become psychologically distant from one another. Porous boundaries are the opposite of a rigid boundary. Porous boundaries are characterized by an unhealthy amount of closeness and enmeshment. Porous boundaries are blurry, and people in porous boundaries find that they tend to have difficulties of saying no. So it's the opposite of a rigid boundary. However, healthy boundaries are characterized by boundaries that include both porous and rigid types of relationships. So you can say that healthy boundaries exist between the two. Okay, so it's time to reflect on what does my current boundary look like. So now that we've gone through different forms and types of boundaries, I want you to take time to reflect on, focus on one relationship that you have in your mind right now and ask these following questions. This person can be your partner, your friends, your loved ones, roommates, etc. The list is endless. But these are the questions. What type of relationship is it? Is it a time-limited relationship? Is it an egalitarian or hierarchical relationship? Do one or both parties initiate contact, and is that a general rule? In this relationship, is there certain things you'd like to say but don't? If you do, what are they? If you had the freedom, what things would you like to say to the other? And what prevents you from saying these things now? Do you feel that your personal boundaries are respected in this relationship? And give 2 examples of how they are or are not. And if you were able, what changes would you initiate in this relationship? So now that we have reflected on our boundaries, we can talk about examples of when a boundary might be healthy or not. When you're in an unhealthy boundary, you might share too much too soon, or At the other end of the spectrum, you might find that you close yourself off and you don't express your needs and wants. You may feel responsible for others' happiness when you're in an unhealthy boundary. You may be unable to say no because you fear of being rejected or abandoned by the other person. Unhealthy boundaries can lead you to have a weak sense of your own identity because you base how you feel about yourself on how others treat you. This can lead you to feel disempowered because you allow others to make decisions for you, and consequently you take less responsibility for your own life. I can give you an example of my own experience of a boundary violation. So I sometimes find myself feeling uncomfortable and feel regret when I realize that I overshared some personal stories or information with others who I feel that I don't know well enough. And this happens quite often, but I think it's also probably likely because of my tendency to be agreeable. But this uncomfortable feeling that I had, that sense of regret, is kind of like a signal to say that, telling me that I just violated my own boundary. This can be an example of when my boundary was not healthy, and it's also a porous type of a boundary. So maybe you might have some examples of when you might have set unhealthy boundaries unintentionally. And maybe the questions we went through earlier can help you to find out. So what do healthy boundaries look like? Healthy boundaries are great. They allow you to have high self-esteem and self-respect. They allow you to share. Having healthy boundaries means that you can share information, your personal information gradually in a mutually sharing and trusting relationship. So that you don't feel uncomfortable or vulnerable with what the other person knows about you. Healthy boundaries can help protect you from physical and emotional space from intrusion. Healthy boundaries can help you have an equal partnership where responsibility and power is shared. Healthy boundaries can help you be assertive because you can confidently and truly say yes or no to others, and feel okay when others say no to you. You can separate your needs, thoughts, feelings, and desires from others. Healthy boundaries can also help you recognize that your boundaries and needs are different from others. And healthy boundaries can ultimately make you feel empowered to make healthy choices and take responsibility for yourself. So even when we recognize that our boundary has been violated, it can often be difficult to try and set that straight. And this difficulty can mainly come from fear of rejection, and ultimately fear of abandonment from our loved ones. It can also come from a fear and avoidance of confrontation. It can also be a sense of guilt that you might have about setting boundaries. Some of us may not have been taught when we were growing up on what healthy boundaries look like, so kind of feel clueless about it. But also there's safety concerns as well. But here are 4 tips to help you set healthy boundaries. The first tip is to define what type of boundary we may be in the moment with this particular person you have in mind. So good news is that you already know how to do this by now from the reflective questions that I presented earlier. Ask yourself, does this boundary fit the model of a healthy boundary or an unhealthy one? If it's unhealthy, is it rigid or porous? What are the different types of boundaries you have with different people, and are these healthy? Now the second tip is to communicate this boundary with the other person. Now this is the hard part because of the fear and of rejection and the confrontation and the guilt that I mentioned earlier. But as hard as it may be, it's important to remain calm and collected when doing this so that your message can be sent out to the other person as clearly as possible. Don't justify, don't get angry, or apologize for the boundary that you're setting, because if you do these things, it can make the boundary setting quite ineffective. It can be counterproductive. The third tip is to use as few words as possible, whilst remaining respectful when communicating this boundary to the other person, so that your point can be made as clear as possible. Know that when you say no, you don't have to explain yourself. That is your choice. The final tip is to set consequences. Explain why that boundary is important to you, but also make sure that you follow through with the consequences so that your boundaries can be effective. As soon as you stop following through with the consequences, your boundary setting will become ineffective. It's also really important to remember when we talked about the fear of rejection, the abandonment, the fear of confrontation, and the guilt. When we have all those fears in mind about setting boundaries, it's important to remember that you are ultimately not responsible for how others react when you set that boundary. That is your right. If you do it respectfully and the other person gets upset, that's not your problem, that's theirs. At first, you might feel selfish, guilty, or embarrassed when you set a boundary, but do it anyway. Stick through, get through that fear, and remind yourself that you have a right to self-care. Setting boundaries can take practice and determination, so don't let anxiety, fear, or guilt prevent you from taking care of yourself. And I would like to say in general, the key to setting boundaries is first figuring out what you want from your various relationships, setting boundaries based on those desires, and then being clear with yourself and other people about your boundaries. Alright, so that concludes it for today. Thank you for listening. I wish you all good luck in your boundary setting journey, but know that we are here to help at Tokyo Mental Health. And if you'd like to contact us, please contact us on inquiries@tokyomentalhealth.com or visit our website www.tokyomentalhealth.com, where there's plenty of resources provided by us, and you can also book appointments there as well. All right, thank you for your time.